3 siblings, 2 were spoiled. 1 was invisible. Guess which one paid off the family's debt? Now they all want an equal share of my success. Spoiler, it's not happening. There were 3 of us. Daniel, the heir apparent with the golden smile and endless charm. Lily, the princess with a voice like spun sugar who never heard the word no. And me, Noah, the overlooked one. The phantom that drifted through the grand halls of our family's once proud home, with footsteps muffled by indifference. In the sprawling suburban palace where we grew up, I learned early that visibility was a privilege reserved for the dazzling, and silence was my only companion. While Daniel received his first car, a gleaming black sports model that still smelled of leather and promise, on his 16th birthday, and Lily was gifted vacations to Europe. To broaden her horizons, I received lectures about self-reliance and character-building chores no one else seemed burdened with. I remember the sting of those moments, not because they were singular, but because they were unrelenting, stitched into the fabric of my upbringing like an invisible thread that only I could feel tightening around my ribs. Even in my earliest memories, the hierarchy was clear, carved into every interaction like names in wet cement. At school concerts, my parents' cheers thundered through the auditorium when Daniel strutted across the stage or when Lily's name appeared in the program. For me, there was polite clapping, quick glances at their watches, and murmured apologies about urgent errands that whisked them away before my part even began. I carried this knowledge deep within me, a hidden stone sinking steadily into my gut with every passing year. The message was unequivocal. My role was to endure, not to shine. Life has a curious way of shifting its weight when you least expect it. The grandeur of our family's legacy, once solid as marble, began to fracture beneath the surface. My father's business ventures, those glittering investments paraded at dinner parties, crumbled into dust. Lawsuits bled the accounts dry. The bank letters, once tossed carelessly into drawers, piled into towers of unpayable debt. The house itself, that monstrous symbol of all their misplaced pride, became a gilded cage whose bars bent under the pressure of unpaid bills and desperate deals whispered. But when the time came to confront the abyss, it was not Daniel, lounging on Mediterranean beaches, nor Lily, nestled safely in Ivy League dormitories, who stepped forward. It was me, the ghost in the walls, who broke the silence. No grand speeches heralded my decision, no tearful family meetings where I was finally seen and recognized. It was quieter than that, lonelier too. I worked jobs they would have sneered at had they known. The night shifts scrubbing grease-stained kitchens, the early mornings stocking warehouse shelves in dim light that burned my eyes. I sacrificed years of sleep, friendships, and any dreams I might have once dared to whisper into the dark. Every dollar I earned was siphoned into the gaping maw of our family's debt, swallowed whole without so much as a thank you. There were no parades, no heartfelt acknowledgments, only the suffocating expectation that of course I would do it, because what else was I good for? I became adept at hiding my exhaustion behind polite smiles. I taught myself not to flinch when they bragged about Daniel's new startup or Lily's glamorous internships, paid for by dwindling funds that should have gone to keeping the electricity on. I learned the art of invisibility so well that I could sit in a room with them and feel myself physically disappear, a trick of the light nobody bothered to notice. But beneath that quiet exterior, something hardened, a steel resolve, sharp and glinting in the unseen recesses of my soul. I vowed, in those solitary hours between double shifts, that if I ever clawed my way out of this pit, it would be on my terms alone. Years dragged on, and the debts, like insatiable beasts, were slowly starved into submission by my labor. The final payment was made in a crumbling bank office, the teller blinking at me with vague disinterest as if she hadn't just witnessed the culmination of a Herculean struggle. I walked out into the thin winter sunlight that day, my hands trembling not with relief but with something fiercer. Anger, pride, a savage, unyielding clarity. My family was free, their names scrubbed clean of disgrace, and they remained blissfully unaware of the true cost extracted from me to achieve it. I didn't stop there. Somewhere along the line, desperation alchemized into ambition. I poured myself into building something more enduring than gratitude or hollow praise. I studied, I networked, I took risks so calculated they left little room for failure. Each success was a brick laid carefully in the fortress I erected around myself, a business empire born not from inherited privilege, but from relentless, grinding effort. Wealth followed naturally, but more intoxicating was the freedom it bought, the ability to dictate the terms of my own existence for the first time. And then, like vultures scenting a fresh carcass on the wind, they returned. The first to reach out was Daniel, his email dripping with casual entitlement. "Bro, heard you're doing well. We should talk about investing together. Family should help family, right?" A week later came Lily, her tone saccharine, asking if I might be interested in partnering on a new venture she was super passionate about, though she struggled to articulate what precisely that venture entailed. Even my parents emerged from the shadows, hosting thinly veiled family dinners where they spoke of unity, of the sacred bond of blood, of how success was sweeter when shared. They tossed around phrases like, "We always believed in you," with the ease of people rewriting history to suit their needs. But I was not the same ghost they had so effortlessly dismissed. Their words slid off me like rain on steel. The child who once craved their approval had long since withered away, replaced by someone who understood the brutal arithmetic of loyalty and betrayal. They wanted equal shares, they said. They insisted it was only fair because, after all, hadn't we all grown up together? Weren't we all part of the same family? I listened to their arguments, their desperate rationalizations, with a detachment so complete it frightened even me. Once, I might have begged for a seat at their table. Now, I realized, I had built my own, and they had no place at it. There was a certain satisfaction, almost surgical in its precision, in the way I refused them. No shouting matches, no melodramatic scenes, just cold, simple truths laid bare before them. I owed them nothing. Every penny, every success, every inch of ground I had gained was mine alone. Their guilt, their regret, their sudden affection, they were not currencies I recognized anymore. They could keep their memories, their selective recollections of family vacations and birthdays where I was a footnote in the margins. I had moved beyond their reach. Still, they persisted, refusing to believe that the dynamic had shifted so irrevocably. They mistook my patience for weakness, my silence for consent. But they were mistaken. This time I was not the invisible one. I was the architect of my destiny, and I would not be reduced to a footnote in their stories again. Success is a strange thing. It drapes itself around you like an invisible cloak, altering the way the world tilts its gaze in your direction, reshaping old narratives with brutal efficiency. Suddenly, the stories they used to tell about me, the absent-minded middle child, the one who never quite measured up, the afterthought who could never compete with his brilliant siblings, were quietly erased, replaced with new fictions where they had always seen my potential. It was a revisionist history written in real time, desperate and clumsy, and I watched its construction with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a doomed experiment. They acted as if their newfound affection could stitch shut the old wounds they had spent a lifetime carving into me, as if their belated applause could somehow erase the years of deafening silence when I had needed them most. The first confrontation came one cool autumn evening, the air crisp with the scent of falling leaves and decaying promises. They had orchestrated a dinner, an ambush dressed up as reconciliation, at a restaurant so lavish it practically screamed desperation. I arrived late, deliberately, savoring the shift in power dynamics as I made them wait. Daniel drummed his fingers on the polished mahogany table, his golden boy confidence tarnished around the edges, while Lily fussed with her tea glass, her laughter brittle and forced. My parents sat stiffly, their smiles stretched too tight, as though they were afraid any wrong move might shatter the fragile illusion they were trying to project. When I entered, all four faces turned toward me with the hungry expressions of people who believed they still held some claim over me. I took my time settling into the leather chair, adjusting my cuffs with slow, deliberate movements, enjoying the discomfort radiating off them like heat waves. They launched into pleasantries, hollow and discordant, speaking of memories I had no desire to revisit, spinning tales of shared hardships they had never truly borne. I let them weave their web, nodding politely, offering non-committal smiles, until finally, when dessert had been served and their patience had worn paper thin, my father cleared his throat and leaned forward with the air of a man preparing to bestow wisdom. "We've been talking," he began, his voice slipping into that patronizing tone he used whenever he thought he was being magnanimous. "And we think it would be best for everyone if we combined our efforts. With your success and Daniel's entrepreneurial spirit and Lily's connections, We could really build something special. A family legacy. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, and for a moment I allowed them to believe I was considering it. I traced the rim of my coffee cup with a single finger, watching the liquid inside tremble ever so slightly, a reflection of the suppressed laughter bubbling just beneath my calm facade. When I finally spoke, my voice was soft, almost gentle, but each word landed with the precision of a hammer driving nails into a coffin. No. The shock on their faces was a balm to wounds I had carried for so long they had become part of me. They scrambled, floundering to reframe the conversation, as if I had misunderstood, as if a clearer explanation would naturally lead to my compliance. Daniel leaned in, his grin sharp and false. "Come on, Noah. This is what families do. We stick together. You wouldn't even have what you have without us." It was almost impressive, the audacity of it, the sheer unblinking gall. I tilted my head, studying him like one might study a particularly fascinating insect. "You're right," I said, savoring the confusion that flickered across his face. "I wouldn't have what I have without you. Without all of you. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment you made it perfectly clear that I was expendable. It taught me to survive. It taught me to expect nothing and work for everything. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad. I owe you more than you'll ever understand. But a share of what I built? No. That belongs to me." The silence that followed was a living thing, crawling across the table, sinking into every empty glass and discarded fork. My mother's lip quivered, a performance more than an emotion, and my father's jaw clenched so tightly I thought I might hear it crack. Lily's eyes glittered with unshed tears, weaponized now, a ploy that had once melted obstacles in her path like snow under the sun. But not with me. Not anymore. They tried reason next. Guilt. Bargaining. My father spoke of family obligations, of debts that could never truly be repaid, conveniently forgetting the very real, very crushing financial debts I had spent a decade erasing on their behalf. Lily spoke of dreams deferred, opportunities lost, lives stunted by circumstances beyond their control. Daniel, less skilled in subtlety, resorted to veiled threats, warnings about what might happen to a reputation if family squabbles became public knowledge. It was laughable, really, how little they understood the fortress I had built around myself. Their arrows shattered harmlessly against its walls, falling at my feet like broken promises. I stood then, smoothing the front of my tailored jacket, my movements unhurried, unbothered by the tableau of desperation arrayed before me. "I wish you all the best," I said, meaning none of it, and turned my back on them without a second thought. As I walked away, I felt the first true sense of peace I had known in years. Not the brittle, fleeting kind that came from avoiding conflict, but the deep, resonant peace of reclaiming ownership over my own narrative. I was no longer the invisible sibling, the forgotten son. I was a storm cloaked in flesh, and I would not be shackled by their expectations ever again. In the days that followed, the attacks escalated. Whispers circulated in the circles where my name had begun to carry weight. Insinuations that I was cold, ungrateful, cruel to the family that had sacrificed so much for me. I heard about meetings behind closed doors where my life was dissected, my achievements minimized, my character assassinated in absentia. They launched smear campaigns wrapped in the guise of concern, presenting themselves as the wounded, the wronged, while painting me as the unfeeling monster who had abandoned them. They underestimated me still. I countered every move with precision. Legal teams were briefed, security measures enhanced, alliances strengthened. Every whisper against me was met with unassailable facts, every shadowy accusation dragged into the harsh light of truth until it withered and died. I would not wage a war of words. I would dismantle their lies with quiet, merciless efficiency. And through it all, I worked. I expanded. I thrived. The business empire that had begun as a lifeline, a desperate scramble for survival, evolved into something formidable. Industries bowed under my influence. Markets shifted at my command. I became a force that could not be ignored, not even by those who had spent a lifetime pretending I did not exist. Invitations poured in, awards ceremonies, galas, interviews, and I accepted them all with the same calm poise, never once mentioning the family whose absence had been the crucible in which I was forged. They watched, of course. They watched as I ascended heights they could not reach, tethered as they were to the fading glory of a name I had single-handedly redeemed. They seethed in their obscurity, plotted in their irrelevance, clung to the tattered remnants of a story where they were the protagonists and I was the background noise. It was almost pitiable, their inability to grasp the new reality. Almost. But pity was a luxury I had long since discarded. I had spent too many nights working while they slept, too many mornings rising before dawn while they dreamed of effortless success. I had bled for every step forward, suffered in silence while they basked in unearned adulation. I owed them nothing but the truth, and the truth was brutal in its simplicity. They were architects of their own downfall, authors of a tragedy they refused to acknowledge. And I was simply the one who refused to be a footnote. The war for my legacy had begun not with a clash of swords, but with the quiet, steadfast refusal to surrender what was mine. It would not end with dramatic ultimatums or tearful reunions. It would end, if it ended at all, on my terms alone. There were still battles to fight, shadows to confront, memories to exhume and bury properly. But as I stood atop the empire I had built from the ashes of their indifference, I knew this with unwavering certainty. I had been invisible once, yes, but now I was inevitable. And no force on earth, not even the desperate clamor of blood ties, would ever render me unseen again. The battle lines had been drawn, not with blood or swords, but with silence sharper than any blade. As the months unspooled themselves in slow, inevitable succession, the war between what was and what now stood became undeniable. My family, those architects of my old invisibility, grew more frantic with every new headline bearing my name, every venture I launched that turned into gold beneath my hands. Their desperation fermented into bitterness, a rot that clung to them even as they continued to mask it behind brittle smiles and empty platitudes. Invitations to family talks flooded my inbox, each one phrased differently but all shrieking the same underlying panic. They were losing their last, tenuous hold over me. It came to a head on a rain-slicked evening that seemed made for final acts. The world outside my office tower blurred behind sheets of cold rain, the city a smear of neon and shadow. They requested one final meeting, a last-ditch attempt to appeal to something within me they were convinced still belonged to them. Some fragment of loyalty, some smoldering ember of guilt they could coax back into a flame of obedience. Perhaps once, long ago, they might have succeeded. But that Noah had died somewhere between the second and third year of solitary labor, buried under broken promises and the grinding weight of necessity. I agreed to the meeting not out of curiosity nor out of malice, but for the sake of closure. One last time, I would let them present their case before I buried the past for good. The room was austere, stripped of anything that might offer comfort or distraction. A long glass table divided us, the surface cold and reflective like the gulf between us. Daniel, once so assured in his unearned supremacy, sat fidgeting with his cufflinks, a tic he had developed recently, perhaps from realizing that charisma alone could not pay debts. Lily perched stiffly on the edge of her seat, her polished image cracking around the eyes, exhaustion and resentment leaking through. My parents sat side by side, brittle unity forged from mutual regret, wearing expressions that hovered somewhere between wounded dignity and naked pleading. For a moment, none of us spoke, the only sound the soft drumbeat of rain against the windows. Then my father leaned forward, his voice low and steady, worn thin by too many nights grappling with realities he could no longer control. "We made mistakes," he said, each word dragged from him like a confession under duress. "We should have treated you better. We see that now." My mother nodded, her hands twisting in her lap, the diamond on her finger catching the sterile light and refracting it into sharp, sterile beams. "You were always strong," she whispered. "Stronger than we knew. We thought you didn't need us." The irony of it almost wrung a laugh from me. Need had been the one currency I had been too poor to afford as a child. I had needed them more than anything, and they had given me absence wrapped in the brittle paper of expectations. Daniel spoke next, his voice thick with resentment, poorly disguised as regret. "We're family," he said. "At the end of the day, that has to count for something. Family, that sacred battered word they wielded now like a shield against the consequences of their own choices. How convenient it was. How suddenly sacred our blood had become once it was clear that my success outstripped anything they could have achieved alone. I rose slowly, feeling the weight of every year that had led to this moment settle onto my shoulders like a crown. I did not raise my voice. I did not rage. I did not accuse. I simply spoke the truth they had spent so long trying to smother beneath layers of denial. "You are right," I said. "We are family. We share blood, history, memories. But what we do not share, what we will never share, is the work it took to build this life. You left me to drown, and when I learned to breathe underwater, you decided you wanted to swim beside me." I crossed to the window, watching the rivers of rain carve frantic paths down the glass, the city lights beyond flickering like distant stars. "I have made peace with what happened," I continued. "I do not hate you. I do not wish you harm. But you have no place in the life I have built, not because you are unworthy, but because you were never willing to pay the price it demanded." Silence fell again, heavy and final. I turned back to them, seeing them not as the towering figures of my childhood, but as they truly were, flawed, frightened, clinging desperately to a past that could no longer protect them. "I will not give you a share," I said. "Not of my wealth, not of my company, not of my time. I have given enough." My words struck with the quiet inevitability of a falling axe. No shouting followed, no bargaining, only the hollow echo of understanding, sinking in at last. Daniel slumped back in his chair, defeated. Lily blinked rapidly, fighting the tears that had once been her greatest weapon. My mother sagged against my father's side, her hand searching blindly for his, as if grasping for something solid in a world slipping away. My father bowed his head, the fight draining out of him in slow, painful increments. I did not wait for them to find new words. There was nothing left to say. I walked out of that room with measured steps, each footfall a closing door, a final nail in a coffin already buried deep beneath the foundations of the man I had become. Outside, the rain washed over me, cool and clean, baptizing me into a future I no longer had to apologize for. I built a life beyond them, and I chose, finally and irrevocably, to live it free. The past would remain exactly where it belonged, behind me, a shadow without substance, unable to claw its way into the light I had claimed as my own. As for my family, they returned to their small, crumbling kingdom of faded memories and empty dreams, nursing their bitterness in silence. They told whatever stories they needed to tell themselves to survive, that I was cruel, that I had changed, that I had forgotten the meaning of family. But I knew the truth. I had not changed. I had simply remembered who I was meant to be, and I would never be invisible again.